The most
Tell me
barbaric
where it
ancient
is. I know you
civilizations,
took it.
their brutal
If you don't tell
practices
me
will
now,
shock you
this
in
will
the
only get
beginning of
worse for
human
you.
history. Survival was never easy. Long before modern cities, machines, and written laws, people lived in small groups surrounded by danger. Wild animals, harsh weather, hunger, and disease were part of daily life. In this difficult world, strength and unity meant the difference between life and death. Over time, some groups learned how to work together better than others. They learned farming, building, and organizing people. Slowly, these groups grew into powerful ancient civilizations that shaped history forever. These early civilizations did not rise overnight. Their growth was slow and full of struggle. People settled near rivers because water meant life. Rivers helped crops grow, provided food, and allowed travel and trade. As villages turned into towns and towns into cities, leaders emerged. These leaders promised protection and order. In return, people followed rules and accepted authority. At first, this system brought stability and hope. People believed they were building a better future for their families. As populations increased, managing people became harder. Leaders had to find ways to control large groups. They created laws, social classes, and systems of punishment. The idea was simple: order must be maintained at all costs. In these early times, there was no police force or human rights as we know them today. Fear often became the strongest tool of control. Leaders believed that if people were afraid of consequences, they would obey without question. Religion played a powerful role in shaping these societies. People believed that unseen forces controlled the world. Floods, droughts, and illnesses were seen as signs of pleasure or anger from higher powers. Priests and rulers often worked together, claiming they were chosen or guided by these forces. This made their authority unquestionable. If a ruler said something was necessary to keep balance in the world, people believed it. Doubting such decisions felt like risking the safety of the entire community. As civilizations grew stronger, they also grew more ambitious. They wanted larger cities, stronger armies, and lasting monuments. Massive buildings were constructed using human labor. For many, this work was exhausting and endless. Yet people accepted it because they believed it served a greater purpose. They were told their suffering helped their civilization survive and stay powerful. Pride in belonging to a great society often kept people silent, even when life was unfair. The environment these civilizations lived in also shaped their behavior. Scarcity of resources led to strict control. Food storage, land ownership, and water access were carefully managed. Any threat to these systems was treated seriously. Leaders feared chaos more than cruelty. They believed that showing softness would invite rebellion and destruction. As a result, harsh traditions slowly became part of normal life. Over time, these practices were no longer questioned. Children grew up seeing strict rules and severe discipline as normal. They were taught that obedience was a virtue and questioning authority was dangerous. Stories, songs, and traditions passed down these ideas from one generation to the next. What may have started as survival strategies slowly became deep-rooted customs. Despite their harsh systems, these civilizations also achieved remarkable things. They developed writing, mathematics, astronomy, and art. They created calendars, trade networks, and legal systems. From the outside, they appeared advanced and impressive. Even today, their achievements amaze historians and visitors. However, behind this greatness was a reality that was often difficult for ordinary people. Leaders lived in comfort while common people worked tirelessly. Social classes were clearly divided. Your birth often decided your future. If you were born into a powerful family, life was easier. If not, your options were limited. Many people believed this was the natural order of the world. They were taught that everyone had a fixed role, and accepting it was part of life. Fear was not always visible, but it was always present. It existed in whispers, in silent obedience, and in the way people avoided eye contact with authority figures. Public rules were designed to remind people who held power. These systems worked for a long time because they were deeply connected to belief and tradition. People did not just obey because they were forced to. They obeyed because they believed it was right. As centuries passed, these civilizations became symbols of strength. Neighboring groups either feared them or wanted to copy them. Stories of their power spread far and wide. However, the same systems that helped them rise also planted the seeds of future problems. Strict control left little room for change. Innovation slowed and compassion was often ignored. Still, at this stage in history, no one imagined a different way of living. Life had always been hard. Compared to constant danger and uncertainty, order, even harsh order, felt safe. People believed that without these systems, their world would fall apart. This belief kept civilization strong on the surface, even as silent suffering continued beneath. Part 1 of this story shows how ancient civilizations rose through struggle, belief, and strict control. Their power was built on survival instincts shaped by fear and faith. While they created lasting achievements, they also developed traditions that placed order above humanity. Understanding their rise helps explain how such practices became possible and why they lasted for so long. As ancient civilizations continued to grow, belief became one of the strongest forces shaping people's lives. In a world where science did not yet exist, humans tried to understand nature through stories and faith. When the sun disappeared, when rivers flooded, or when crops failed, people searched for reasons beyond the visible world. They believed unseen powers controlled everything. These beliefs were not just personal feelings, they became the foundation of entire societies. Religious ideas explained fear. If something bad happened, it was believed that higher powers were unhappy. If good fortune arrived, it meant those powers were pleased. This way of thinking gave meaning to suffering. Pain and hardship were no longer random. They were seen as necessary parts of life. People were taught that endurance proved loyalty and faith. Questioning these ideas felt dangerous, as if doubt itself could invite disaster. Priests and spiritual leaders held great influence. They were seen as messengers between the human world and the unseen forces. Ordinary people trusted them completely. These leaders spoke with confidence, using rituals, symbols, and traditions that had been practiced for generations. Because knowledge was limited, few could challenge their words. When priests said a tradition was required to protect the community, people obeyed without hesitation. Rulers often joined their power with religion. Kings and emperors claimed they were chosen by higher forces or even related to them. This made their authority unquestionable. Disobeying a ruler was not just breaking a law, it was seen as going against the natural order of the universe. This belief made control easier. People followed commands not only out of fear of punishment, but also out of fear of spiritual consequences. Over time, harsh traditions were explained as sacred duties. People were told that certain actions were necessary to keep balance in the world. These practices were presented as acts of protection, not cruelty. Families believed that if they followed traditions exactly, their homes would remain safe. Even when these customs caused pain, they were accepted because they were wrapped in faith and hope. Stories played a powerful role in spreading these ideas. From a young age, children listened to tales about heroes, gods, and punishments for disobedience. These stories were repeated during gatherings, festivals, and ceremonies. They shaped how people saw right and wrong. Fear and respect were taught together, making belief systems deeply rooted in everyday life. Social pressure also reinforced these traditions. Anyone who questioned common beliefs risked being seen as dangerous. People feared being isolated from their community more than personal suffering. Belonging meant survival. As a result, silence became common. Even those who felt doubt kept it hidden, choosing acceptance over conflict. Beliefs also helped justify inequality. People were taught that social roles were decided by unseen forces. If someone was born into hardship, it was believed to be their destiny. Wealth and power were seen as rewards for loyalty and obedience in past generations. This thinking reduced anger and rebellion. People accepted unfair systems because they believed they were part of a larger plan. Rituals became central to daily life. These events brought people together and strengthened unity. They reminded everyone of shared beliefs and fears. Participation was expected, not optional. Refusing to take part was seen as a threat to harmony. Through repetition, rituals became normal, even when they involved extreme discipline or sacrifice of comfort. As generations passed, the original reasons behind many traditions were forgotten. What remained was habit and fear. People followed rules because they had always been followed. The idea of change felt dangerous. Stability mattered more than kindness. Maintaining order was considered the highest goal, even if it meant ignoring human suffering. Leaders used belief wisely. They knew that controlling the mind was more powerful than controlling the body. When people believed hardship had meaning, they endured more. When they believed obedience pleased higher powers, they became loyal. This made civilization strong and united on the surface, but fragile underneath. Despite the weight of these belief systems, moments of doubt still existed. Some individuals quietly wondered if suffering was truly necessary. However, without education or freedom to speak, these thoughts rarely spread. The system remained strong because it was supported by fear, tradition, and shared faith. This part of the story reveals how belief justified harsh traditions in ancient civilizations. Faith gave meaning to pain and made control acceptable. By blending fear with hope, leaders shaped societies where extreme practices felt normal and even necessary. Understanding this helps explain why people accepted such traditions for so long, believing they were protecting not just their world, but their future. As ancient civilizations became larger and more complex, maintaining order turned into one of the biggest challenges for their leaders. When thousands of people lived together in crowded cities, small conflicts could quickly grow into serious problems. To prevent chaos, rulers believed that strict laws were necessary. These laws were not designed to be gentle or forgiving. Instead, they were meant to be clear, firm, and unforgettable. The goal was simple: make people think twice before breaking the rules. In those times, laws were often announced publicly so everyone could hear them. Some were written on stone or metal so they would last for generations. These laws covered every part of daily life, from work duties to family behavior. There was little room for personal choice. People were expected to follow rules exactly as they were given. Even small mistakes were treated seriously, because leaders believed that allowing small disobedience would lead to bigger problems later. Authority was absolute. The ruler's word was final, and questioning it was unthinkable. Kings, emperors, or councils held complete control over the people. They believed they were responsible for keeping balance and stability. If order failed, they feared the entire civilization could collapse. Because of this fear, mercy was often seen as weakness. Strength was shown through firmness and control. Punishment was used not only to correct behavior but also to send a message. When one person faced consequences, others learned from it. This system relied heavily on fear. Leaders believed that visible consequences would prevent future rule breaking. People obeyed not because they understood the fairness of the law, but because they feared what would happen if they did not. Justice, as we understand it today, did not exist in the same way. There were no lawyers to defend the accused or systems to investigate deeply. Decisions were often made quickly. Authority figures trusted their own judgment more than evidence. Social status also played a major role. Powerful families were often treated more gently, while common people faced harsher outcomes. This imbalance made the system unfair, but it remained unchallenged. Public order mattered more than individual suffering. Leaders believed that the safety of the majority justified strict treatment of a few. If someone was seen as a threat to stability, they were dealt with firmly. The idea of personal rights had not yet formed. People belonged to the state, not the other way around. Their lives were seen as part of a larger machine that had to keep running. Fear slowly became part of everyday life. People learned to watch their words and actions carefully. They avoided standing out or attracting attention. Silence became a form of protection. Families taught their children to obey authority without question. Respect for power was taught early, so obedience became automatic rather than forced. Workplaces were also controlled by strict rules. Labor was organized tightly to support the needs of the state. Missing duties or failing expectations was not tolerated. Productivity was valued over comfort. People worked long hours because they believed it was their duty. Complaining was dangerous, so endurance became a common trait. Even family life was influenced by law. Marriages, inheritance, and social roles were regulated. Personal feelings mattered less than duty. People were expected to put the needs of the state above their own happiness. This created a society where emotions were often hidden, and survival depended on following expectations. Despite this harsh structure, many people believed the system was necessary. They remembered times of disorder, hunger, and war. Compared to chaos, strict order felt safer. Leaders reminded people of past dangers to justify firm control. As long as the city stood strong and enemies stayed away, many accepted the cost. Authority figures surrounded themselves with symbols of power. Grand buildings, ceremonies, and uniforms reminded people who was in charge. These symbols created distance between rulers and the ruled. The gap made authority feel untouchable and permanent. People rarely saw leaders as ordinary humans. They were viewed as living representations of the law itself. Over time, these systems became deeply rooted. Laws were passed down, unchanged, from one generation to the next. Even when circumstances changed, rules remained the same. Flexibility was rare. Leaders feared that changing laws would weaken their control. As a result, systems that once helped civilizations grow slowly began to limit them. Still, resistance was rare. Most people focused on surviving and protecting their families. Dreams were small and personal. Hope existed, but it was quiet. People learned how to live within the limits placed on them. This adaptability helped civilizations last for centuries, even under strict authority. This part of the story shows how law and punishment shaped ancient societies. Absolute authority created order, but it also created fear and inequality. While these systems helped civilizations grow strong, they often ignored human compassion. Understanding this balance between control and stability helps explain how power was maintained for so long, even at great human cost. Behind the grand cities, strong walls, and famous monuments of ancient civilizations lived ordinary people whose lives were often filled with quiet struggle. While history remembers kings, warriors, and great buildings, it rarely tells the full story of those who carried the heaviest burden. These were farmers, builders, workers, servants, and families who gave their energy and time to keep society running. Their sacrifices made greatness possible, yet their voices were rarely heard. Most people woke up each day with the same routine. Work began early and ended late. Farming families depended on the land and the weather. A good harvest meant survival, while a bad one meant hunger and fear. Even when food was scarce, people were still expected to give a portion to rulers, temples, or storage centers. Refusing was not an option. Survival depended on obedience, even when it felt unfair. Builders and laborers worked on massive projects that symbolized power and pride. These structures were meant to last forever and impress future generations. For those who worked on them, life was exhausting. Days were spent lifting heavy materials, following strict orders, and pushing their bodies beyond comfort. Rest was limited, and injuries were common. Still, people continued because they believed their efforts served something greater than themselves. Families carried emotional weight as well. Parents worried constantly about their children's future. Opportunities were limited and social roles were fixed. A child born into hardship usually remained there. Dreams of change were rare, not because people lacked hope, but because the system left little room for it. Acceptance became a way to protect the heart from disappointment. Many people lived under constant pressure to meet expectations. Failing at work, breaking a rule, or attracting unwanted attention could bring serious trouble. This pressure affected how people spoke, acted, and even thought. Joy existed, but it was often found in small moments, shared meals, simple celebrations, or quiet conversations at home. Women often faced double burdens. They managed homes, raised children, and supported family survival while also following strict social rules. Their lives were controlled by tradition and expectation. Choices were limited, and personal freedom was rare. Yet women remained the emotional strength of families, passing down stories, values, and hope to the next generation. Children learned early that life was not gentle. From a young age, they were taught discipline and obedience. Play existed, but responsibility came quickly. Many children worked alongside adults to support their families. Education, when available, focused on teaching respect for authority and tradition rather than personal growth. Despite the hardship, people found ways to endure. Communities supported one another during difficult times. Neighbors shared food when possible and helped rebuild after disasters. These small acts of kindness kept humanity alive within strict systems. Even in harsh environments, compassion did not disappear completely. However, emotional pain often remained hidden. People learned to keep their suffering private. Speaking openly about unfairness was dangerous. Silence became a survival skill. Over time, this silence created distance between individuals and those in power. Leaders saw numbers and productivity, not personal stories. The gap between rulers and common people continued to grow. Leaders lived in comfort, surrounded by guards and advisors. Their decisions affected thousands, yet they rarely saw the direct impact. This distance made it easier to ignore suffering. As long as cities stood strong and resources flowed, the system was considered successful. For many, life felt like a cycle with no escape. Work, duty, and obedience repeated day after day. Aging brought little rest. Support systems were limited, and care depended on family rather than society. Still, people held onto dignity. They found pride in doing their duties well and protecting their loved ones. Some individuals quietly questioned the system. They wondered why suffering was necessary and why kindness was so limited. These thoughts were often kept private, shared only with trusted family members. Without a way to organize or speak freely, such doubts rarely led to change. The system remained powerful because it controlled not just actions but thoughts. As generations passed, the human cost became deeply woven into society. Suffering was no longer seen as something unusual. It was expected. People adjusted their hopes and desires to match reality. Survival mattered more than happiness. Stability mattered more than fairness. Yet even within this reality, humanity endured. Love between families, loyalty between friends, and care within communities proved that compassion could survive even the harshest conditions. These quiet strengths kept societies alive when systems felt cold and unchanging. This part of the story reveals the true price of ancient greatness. Behind every strong wall and lasting monument were countless lives shaped by hard work, limited choice, and silent endurance. While civilizations gained power and fame, ordinary people paid the cost with their energy, freedom, and unspoken pain. Understanding this human side reminds us that history is not only built by rulers, but also by those who carried the weight of the world without recognition. As time moved forward, even the strongest ancient civilizations began to change. Nothing built by humans lasts forever, and systems based only on strict control slowly face challenges. The same rules and traditions that once created stability started to show their limits. Societies grew larger, ideas spread farther, and people slowly began to see the world in new ways. Change did not come suddenly, but it began quietly, like a slow shift in the wind. Trade and travel played an important role in this change. When people from different regions met, they shared stories, customs, and beliefs. They noticed that other societies lived differently and still survived. This opened minds. People began to realize that harsh order was not the only way to maintain stability. New ideas planted small seeds of doubt in systems that had existed for centuries. Education also slowly expanded. Writing and record-keeping allowed ideas to travel beyond one place or one ruler. Philosophers, thinkers, and teachers began asking deeper questions about life, fairness, and leadership. While their voices were often limited, their thoughts spread quietly through conversations and writings. These ideas encouraged people to think, not just obey. As generations passed, rulers faced new challenges. Maintaining strict control became harder as populations grew and communication improved. Old laws that once worked no longer fit new realities. Some leaders adapted, adjusting rules and allowing limited flexibility. Others refused to change, believing that tradition alone would protect their power. This refusal often led to unrest, confusion, and decline. Economic pressure also played a role. Large systems required constant resources. When harvests failed or trade slowed, stress increased. Ordinary people felt the pressure first. Hunger, uncertainty, and exhaustion weakened loyalty. When people could no longer meet expectations, belief in the system began to fade. Fear alone was no longer enough to maintain order. Slowly, compassion began to gain value. Communities realized that cooperation and care could strengthen society just as much as control. New moral ideas emphasized kindness, fairness, and shared responsibility. These values did not erase hardship, but they offered hope. People began to imagine a world where strength and humanity could exist together. Some civilizations declined, while others transformed. Their cities may have fallen silent, but their lessons remained. History remembered both their achievements and their mistakes. Future societies studied the past, learning what helped civilizations grow and what caused them to weaken. These lessons shaped new systems of law, leadership, and belief. The memory of strict control became a warning. People realized that order without compassion leads to suffering. Power without fairness creates distance. Progress without care leaves wounds that last for generations. Slowly, humanity moved toward ideas of rights, justice, and shared dignity, even though the journey was long and difficult. Still, the influence of ancient civilizations never disappeared. Their art, science, and organization continue to inspire the modern world. At the same time, their harsh practices remind us of the cost of ignoring human value. History is not meant to be admired without reflection. It is meant to teach. As societies evolved, the idea of leadership changed. A good leader was no longer seen only as strong, but also as wise and fair. Laws slowly shifted from fear-based control to systems meant to protect people. While perfection was never achieved, progress was made through learning and reflection. The stories of ordinary people gained more importance over time. Historians began to look beyond rulers and battles, focusing on daily life and human experience. This shift helped modern societies understand the true impact of ancient systems. It reminded the world that history is built not only by power but by people. Today, when we look back at ancient civilizations, we see both greatness and pain. Their rise teaches us about strength and cooperation. Their decline teaches us about the danger of ignoring compassion. Together, these lessons help guide modern values and choices. This final part shows that history is a mirror. It reflects what happens when order replaces empathy and when belief is used without balance. Ancient civilizations were shaped by their time, but their experiences continue to speak to us. By learning from their past, humanity moves forward with a better understanding of how to build societies that value both strength and humanity. The legacy of these civilizations lives on, not only in ruins and records, but in the lessons they left behind. Their stories remind us that true progress is not measured only by power or size, but by how a society treats its people.